in Indian history, our timelines are very wavy. I mean, if Tamil Nadu has gone to the 19th century, Assam can, in that century, still be in the 17th century.
What's going to unroll next is an entire swath of 12,000 years of history. It's a book called The Indians, and please note, it's called The Histories of a Civilization with an S. And as I told you, serendipitously, a strand develops between all our sessions where all three become interconnected. Here, what we get is an idea of India and a civilization which is so kaleidoscopic, it takes your breath away. It's completely unique. It's something that you can't but help be proud of. And it is gathered with evidence, with 100 scholars contributing to this book, and Professor GN Devy and two others, Tony Joseph and Ravi Korisetri, who is an archaeologist. The three have edited this book, but 100 scholars across the world have contributed to it, to go from early Indians all the way up to modern India, and then tantalizingly, like Nirja, stopping at 2000. That's a whole other phenomenon that we have to probe. But what GN Devy has focused on is, as I said, the early Indians, the growth of languages, religions, philosophies, different geographies, different states, the Bhakti movements, all the way up to colonialism, our encounter with Islam, and then modern India. To go through that whole sweep in 40 minutes is going to be tough, so we'll focus on a few strands of that conversation. But first, I just wanted to give you a little inkling about who Professor GN Devy is. He's a true polymath, a kaleidoscope himself. His parents separated when he was young, so he worked as a vendor, even in the mines as a labor, but he's an absolute repository of knowledge and of languages. He did a census of Indian languages where he captured 780 languages and their histories in India. In 1967, when the last census was done, there were 1,600 languages in India. By the time he was doing it, there were 780 languages, and now there are very few. So he's literally capturing the vanishing histories of India. He's done many other books, but this is perhaps the most ambitious and magnificent attempt to change the spotlight on how we conceive of ourselves as a civilization and a country. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Ganesh Devy. I've been told that's the better angle, so I'm putting you there. Professor Devy, as I said, it's the sheer sweep of what you've undertaken is so ambitious and so magnificent that I have to ask you the most basic of questions, which is, how did you conceive of this book? It's hard enough to write about 70 years of India's history. You've undertaken 12,000 years of this geography. So what triggered the book for you?
One thing is, I consider myself very fortunate being born in India. I travel all over the world. And I don't believe in rebirth.
You don't believe in rebirth?
Rebirth.
What kind of Indian are you, sir?
Therefore, I thought this one opportunity of being here, I owe something to this land. So last time round, I went around looking for languages, and you mentioned that. So I was thinking, who are we? From where have we come? How did we form a society? What kind of climate there was? When did we begin agriculture? When did we start using small tools, our technologies? When did we go into high metaphysical thought. All of the story must be told someday by somebody. And then I look around and I found something rather interesting. The professional historians speak history. The professional archaeologists talk about that which is not history but proto-history, time before history. And there are yet others like scientists who are doing genetics and so on. They talk of prehistory, which is slightly beyond that. I thought if all of these belong to the past, why can't the entire past be presented as a single piece, factual report of our past? So this was the intellectual curiosity. But I must confess, and I do this in confidentially. Please don't tell anybody there. I'm a very lazy person.
You're a very?
Lazy, very indolent. Indolent is the right English word for that. Absolutely. I mean, nothing is dearer to me than sleep and lazing around. But then some years back, the government of India appointed a committee to look at the Indian past, review the Indian past for the last 12,000 years. So I said, why, how come 12,000 years? Why not from the times when the Big Bang happened, which was 14 billion years ago, or when the solar system shaped 6 billion years ago, or when life came up? The point was the Holocene, about say 10,500 years before Christ, that's 12,000 years before us, was a great climate change event which enabled life to sprout once again. Because 7,000 years prior to that, most of the species had been wiped out. Some had survived. Once life started sprouting once again, population increased, then they went out and formed a civilization. So this government plan had a committee which, and I must confess, and I do this not confidentially, publicly this time, this committee had no woman in it. No Muslim, no Christian, no Sikh, no Parsi, no Jain, no Buddhist, no tribal. No tribal. Nobody from the northeast, nobody from the south. And I said, if only those people there look at the history, they will have a certain prism. Because history is not just the past, it's also a method of looking at the past. So I should produce an alternative of looking at history. 12,000 years, I said. And because I owe it to this land, it was my duty, despite my being such a lazy person. I thought this is the time to wake up, work hard, put together. So I gave a call out to several hundred scholars, brought 100 together, produced this book. Nothing much. Thank you.
I'll just, with this self-irony, I just want to share another anecdote to tell you who we have on stage, is that Professor Devy, like he says, he's lazy. He's also perennially scared of everything down to a cockroach. But when Professor Kalburgi was murdered for his rationalism, then Professor GN Devy and his wife were well ensconced in Gujarat. They had the Bhasha Center, they had the whole ecosystem there. But Ganesh Devy and his wife uprooted themselves and went all the way to Karnataka and stayed in Dharwad because there was nobody to fight the case on Kalburgi's behalf. So that's Professor General Ganesh Devy for you. But
no, ladies and gentlemen, I don't like murders. I'm really scared of. What I dislike even more is to see a family left without any umbrella for no fault of theirs. And worse still is, if the state machinery does not protect that family, that's not civilization. Therefore, we had to do it. I mean, I would not have done it without a provocation at all. I'm not an activist, but if there is a provocation, what else can I do?
Produce a book as you have done. Professor Devi, I'm going to go right in now. And, again, as I said, there's such a sweep. I want to focus on 3 or 4 strands. We can't even begin to unravel all of this. Let's stick with the early part of, you've said histories of a civilization. And like you said, you wanted to establish that there is no one history of this country. It's too vast. You've also said that timelines matter in history writing. But in India, timelines are not uniform, So let's start with the early controversies about India. The biggest ones are about the Vedic age and Sanskrit and the Aryans, Who are they? What are they? When do the Vedas, how do we date the Vedas? And was the Indus Valley really the Vedic age as well, Or were they actually synonymous with the Dravidians, which are the people of South India? So your book takes in this whole sweep. Unravel just this particular contentious piece of it, and what did your evidence find?
Well, for about 70,000 years, humans have been nomadic in habit. They've been migrating from place to place. I mean, out of Africa, they move to all continents. And from those, it is not as if they remain landlocked there. They've been moving about. It is when humans produce deadliest weapons, particularly the use of iron, that people started settling down more firmly than before. Now, this is roughly the time of 3,000 years before. So, 3,000 years, roughly. Prior to that, people were nomadic in habit. Some came here early. Some came here 65,000 years ago. In South India, here in Tamil Nadu, also Andaman, 45,000 years before our time, they went there. I mean, there's an absolutely fascinating book by David Rick, who we are, from where we came, and it's all established with genetics. I'm coming to the question of Sanskrit, Saraswati, Vedas. I'm coming because that question has a past. Therefore, I'll be brief. So, after some wealth was produced by the farmers, they decided to create urban civilization, which is the Indus civilization, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and hundreds of small or large cities. But they declined.
They declined.
This is 2,500 years before Christ. That's 4,500 years before our time to 3,900 years before our time. 2,500 BC to 1,900 BC was the most prominent time of the Indus civilization. There is a gap of 500 years after that. And from about 1,400 years before Christ, that's 3,500 years before our time, before present, we have the first presence of the earliest form of Sanskrit, that is the Vedic Sanskrit, which was much different from later Sanskrit of Kalidasa's times. So before Vedic Sanskrit came to be spoken there by people who were in habit nomadic, and there was no surprise, everybody was a nomad. So before that Sanskrit came to be spoken here, the question is, were there other languages here or not? In South Asia, the answer is yes, absolutely, with great clarity. There were other languages. There could be a Proto-Dravidian language or many languages. And people who settle in India, fortunately, the food was in plenty here, animals plenty. They tended to, rather settle at one place, formed small groups, clans, Kula, call it Kula. There was enough. Their languages became independent. So there were dozens and dozens of other languages in existence before the first Sanskrit word was spoken in India. And Vedas we take as the first proof of the Sanskrit language. But it is not as if those people who spoke Sanskrit on the very first day composed Rigveda. It's not that. It's a slow process. They came from the steppes, Eurasian steppes. A branch of it went to Iran. There is a small branch of it went to China also, called Tocharian, which is an Indo-Aryan language. So one branch in Europe, forming Greek, Latin, other European languages, Germanic languages, Iranian languages, and Sanskrit. So this was the spread. And
so what does that finally, to my question, because as I said, that's a topic that interests everyone right up to contemporary times. There's huge discussion about the Aryans, whether they were off the land. So when you say that, yes, there were languages before, there was a migration from Africa 70,000 years ago. There's genetic proof that people were here 45,000 years ago. So what I'm saying, just to this specific question, what does that reveal?
Okay, what I will say, I'll take liberty to transgress it. I'll first say what the problem is, from where it comes. When Sir William Jones proposed that there was a common language between Greek, Latin, Persian, Sanskrit, and so on, he named it as Indo-European language, of which Indo-Aryan was considered a branch. Aryan name was given because the term Arya, which means hey you, exists in that language. That term itself has come from Iranian Arya, which has gone from Dravidic languages, Are, which is also in Hindi, Are kya baat hai? Are, in Marathi, Are cha, surprise. So this is called intimate personal pronoun. As in English, we have, I say a sentence like, one doesn't know if it is going to rain or not. That one means, in some cases I, in some cases it can mean you. Intimate personal pronoun, Are or Arya, was taken to be, by mistake, by French linguists as name of a clan or a group, and the French linguists of late 19th century went in search of that group to North Europe. Germans picked up that idea and they said, when those Aryas were there, they had pure Aryan blood, but now the Aryan blood is getting mixed up and therefore we become weak. Look at what happened to them, those who went to Asia. This was Hitler's wisdom. This whole question of Arya, purity, sacredness, all of that gets reflected in our attitude that we have towards the Sanskrit language in the present day. The basic problem is not Arya or Sanskrit or Saraswati river. The problem is different, and I will just use one sentence. The problem is past is a vast scheme of string of moments. History as it is written is a smaller time span. So history that was and history as it is written always have a gap between them. History as it is written as a narrative is a representation which is not exactly like the past. It always reflects the present concerns. Therefore, what we write as history is a reflection of the present more than truth of the past.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Professor Devy, when we were talking earlier, as I said, the canvas is so large, I'm going to have to keep pinning you down like a clothespin. But the broad argument, which is fascinating in what your book, proves, is that you were mentioning Samuel Huntington, the clash of civilizations. And your book is the exact antithesis of that. All this scholarship that you've done, if you were to distill it down to just one phrase, what did you discover while putting this whole book together? What is that one truth about India?
Well, that view was presented by, I'm of course going to use one phrase, but one phrase put in 4 sentences.
Okay.
I'll come to that one phrase.
You're not allowing me to distill this into a television conversation.
After all, this is also sponsored by, distillery and all that. An American political scientist in 1990s, immediately after the Berlin Wall went down and the world had become unipolar, decided to propose a new discourse of clash, because clash had gone out of life after the fall of the Berlin Wall, after Russia was dismantled. And so clash of civilizations was proposed. And in that clash of civilizations, that is the title of the book, and many of us have read here. The clash of civilization was as if Europe was getting constantly destroyed by the Islamic countries. Now, that attitude, that approach boiled down to demonization of certain civilizations, which were civilizations of exchange, of trade, of giving, of sympathy, of prayers, of spirituality, of affection. We were included in that. We were included in that. This book turns around this clash of civilization idea and talks of harmony in civilization and continuity, and despite discontinuities of civilization, and plenitude and diversity as the foundation of civilization.
And I'm going to steal your phrase and share it with the audience, because Professor Devy is refusing to use his own wonderful phrase. But he said the thing that this book really shows is that India is a collaboration of civilizations. You know, that was a fantastic phrase, I think, which completely shifts the lens on who we are, you know. And in that collaboration of civilizations, Professor Devy, like I said, you've gone from languages to religions to to different geographies, and you've used the word histories. So in that, because you mentioned the Islamic demonization that, say, the West was doing, I'd like you again to address these fault lines, because one is good intent, the other is to take on some of the fears or the stories or the truths that are told. So your book presents how languages were infusing each other. There was this collaboration, and we'll get into that. But before that, the other big argument that goes on is that, yes, there was destruction, there were libraries burning, the Nalanda library was burning, there were temple destruction. How, in your scholarship of this book, how did you take on that evidence, and how have you dealt with that? Where does that fit in the collaboration of civilizations?
There are certain things which all people all over the world do at one time. Sometimes science, in the name of science and technology, many people were killed. So there have been brutalities, there have been cruel states. Formation of state itself is a cruel act of cruelty. In itself, at the foundation of that is somebody is more superior and all others are G Sahab, that is. But there have been conflicts, particularly conflict between the Buddhists and the non-Buddhists, the rationalists and the non-rationalists. The giants had to migrate from eastern states to western states in 300 years' time after Mahavir had gone. They had become homeless. We don't talk of diaspora. So there have been such instances with Muslims, with Hindus, with Jains, with Sikhs, in all religions. But the nature of the collaboration highlights what we are, who we are, and that is, say, you think of a running race, sprint. Everybody stands, next to each other, and all of them compete for the trophy. But in football, some people play forward, some backward. In Indian history, our timelines are very, very wavy. If Tamil Nadu has gone to the 19th century, Assam can, in that century, still be in the 17th century. And yet, we move ahead together. That kind of, so in a football match, you see, or birds flying in the sky, there is a collaborative synchronization of activity. We have that kind of collaborative approach. Clash and conflict for resource, for claims, for entitlements, and even for revenge. And worse in our case, worse than revenge in our case is the idea of self-respect. Self-respect. There is something, I mean, all of us are high-strung by the idea of swabhiman. As soon as, insult takes place, I mean, I go to somebody's wedding and they don't ask me with sufficient warmth to eat. I take offense, and then for 3 generations, I am there. That is, I have not seen it in England at all. I mean, they are quite shameless. In the next generation, they forget and they.
Right.
So there have been cruelties, atrocities. I mean, temples have been broken, mosques have been broken, gurudwaras have been broken, and the worship places of Buddhists and the Jains have been broken. But Indians are Indians. They go back and rebuild those. They forgive each other. In fact, they marry into each other. We are extremely fond of marrying, and our population has increased because of that. And it's a sign of civilization. It's a sign of civilization because we keep the continuity of Homo sapiens under difficult conditions. I go to Calcutta and Bombay, and I look at people and see, and I ask why and how can they remain alive? My only answer is because they have inherited this great civilization of India to remain alive under whatever conditions. And I'm saying this as a positive thing. Positive things. Sorry. But clash of civilization is not our way. We have had conflicts, but we have not decided to destroy another civilization. And I'll give you an example. When the British were here and we were fighting for them to go back, Gandhi said, let them go back, but don't kill them and send their corpses home. Let them go back alive. I mean, they are here, it's our fault. Let them go back, we'll forgive them. And we very, very blithely, very gleefully accepted the Queen of England as the head of Commonwealth. And our first, after independence, Mountbatten could remain here as head of our state for a little while. What's the harm? We accepted all people from all over the world. Acceptance and realism are the two most defining features of this civilization. Realism is not knowledge of reality. Realism means philosophically to believe that life existed before me and it will continue to exist after me. I am nobody particular. This is an ego annihilating civilization, and any egoist who stands out saying, I am the tallest statue in the cosmos, will easily go down because the storm that India is will make her or him fall down.
That's beautifully put. You've shared a couple of beautiful metaphors, this idea of the birds in formation and the football team. There's a huge section in your book where you actually, you go into different states of India, different geographies of India, and zero in on different stories, which are all simultaneously expressing themselves and living together. So that's a whole section. I won't try and dive into that. But, one of the big arguments in your book is that, like we said, it's the kaleidoscope. And in that, there is this, the Puranas and the Mahabharata and the Ramayana is a story that pervades this entire geography, and yet you're documenting 780 languages, 1600 languages at one time, yet there are these two central stories. So I come back to a modern argument, which is that was there any civilizational ethos, was there an awareness, was India aware of itself as one common conceptual imaginative space? So what would your answer be to that? You just said that yes, this is an ego-annihilating civilization. It believes in realism. It believes in acceptance. Now, these stories, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, traveled all over this geography at a time when there was no common language. How did that happen? You know, what does your scholarship reveal? How were these stories traveling? How did a sacred geography form in this country?
We have been one, but we have not been one like a unit. We have been one like an understanding. This is rather abstract, but we've been one like an understanding. And I mean, to think of this example, when the Adi Shankaracharya, goes from Kerala all the way to Himalaya, did he have one language? No, no. He did not have a single language, but he had a language of understanding that there are different languages and one can pass through those without changing oneself. The Mahabharata story plays out. Partly is geography of the Mahabharata stories, partly Afghanistan, partly northwestern India. People there did not think that they belonged to different languages, and in fact, the first time the Mahabharata was recited in the Adi Parva, they say a singer comes to an ashram, goes to an ashram, and the children there start listening to the story that he tells. He stops abruptly. They say, please tell the remaining part of the story. He says, Ashtadasha sahasrani ashtadasha shatani chaham veti shuko veti sanjaya veti vanam. Look, I know this much. Shuka knows another 8,000 lines and Sanjay knows another 8,000 lines. Sanjay belonged to one social class. Shuka belonged to yet another social class. And this man was a wandering forest man. So a tribal, to use modern terminology, tribal, scheduled caste and half Brahmin, they all were common in the knowledge of this story. The love of story is peculiarly Indian. But your question bothers me, the earlier question. Two mortal wounds Indian civilization suffered from. And we have not been good at curing those. One is the caste system, caste discrimination, and the other is our bifocal attitude to. I don't know the full meaning of that word. Our split attitude to women. We treated women very badly. No other civilization has treated women as badly as Indians have in the past. And the caste system. And we have not found any solution. And those are the two bleeding wounds in our civilization. Rather than somebody coming and destroying a temple, another going and destroying a mosque. That is temporary. That gets healed. But this caste and patriarchy are absolutely, and we still have to spend another 12,000 years by the time we get over this and become a truly civilized society.
Right. Professor Devy, I just want to pull you back into this discussion about how the stories traveled, because the central thesis of your book is this kaleidoscope, and unfortunately we keep running out of time. But when I asked you this question about the Mahabharata, you talked earlier about the Dubashi, and again, because we are always in search of uniformity and oneness, I wanted you to share with the audience the sheer marvel of how in such a disparate and yet unified space, how did stories travel?
Oh, to be in Chennai and to tell this story, I just love it. This is a story about Surat, but it also applies to Chennai. When the East India Company was set up first, 1600, £5, 4 shillings capital, and Sir Thomas Roe lands in India, and he sends an application to the Badshah in Delhi. At that time, the capital was temporarily in Ajmer, temporary. But how will Sir Thomas Roe write to Jahangir or Shah Jahan? So he engages a Dubhashi, a translator, but not one translator. There are two translators. So, from English to Portuguese translation, Portuguese is then translated into the language of Armenia. Armenic is translated into Persian. Persian is translated into Gujarati. The answer to that application goes back through the entire circuit. I mean, we boast of our slow bureaucracy. They were even better than us.
That story is that it took, you want to give the punchline?
16 years, 16 years.
16 years for him to get permission.
They got the license to, and ease of business was 16 years. In Chennai, it would have happened the same way. I mean, they came, the French came. Did they know Tamil? No. So they had to get some Arabs to speak some Malayalam, who would speak some Tamil, who would speak some other language. I think our ability to live in many worlds, why take this example? But we went through the colonial phase of 200 years. In all other continents, people who went through the colonial phase changed altogether. We remained exactly the way. We picked up cricket. But the rest of the things, our music is our music. The British are worse than us. They even did not learn to take bath twice a day as people in Chennai. Twice a week was enough for them. But I think we live in many worlds, and that goes to our metaphysics, our sense of reality, our worldview. And that metaphysics it's a zero-sum metaphysics. That metaphysics is born out of our social composition. That social composition is the result of multiple migrations and how we assimilated them. So there is an organic unity between who we are, from where we came, what we do in life, how we think, how we produce language, how we build our metaphysics, and how it impacts every act in life, from our breakfast to the way we dress ourselves and everything. We are an organic civilization. And therefore we have remained alive as a civilization without getting into conflict with any other civilization. Therefore, that thesis of conflict of civilizations was wrong, and we must reverse it. Therefore, this book has come out. Thank you.
Well, that's a beautiful note to end. So, as I said, Professor Devy's book is so vast and sprawling that I haven't even attempted to get into sections of the book. But the larger philosophical ideas, that who are we? Three major ideas that his book establishes is this, which I found fascinating. The idea of timelines rather than timeline, the idea of histories of a people rather than history. And the stories of tribals, Northeast, different languages, different philosophies, different religions. There's a whole, a potpourri of ideas there. And then the third, which to me is the biggest one, which is that if anyone asks us, what is India? We are a collaboration of civilizations. That just is an amazing idea that Professor GN Devy's book establishes with evidence, not out of his laziness, but a deep, deep, deep scholarship. Professor Devy's next book, Being a Lazy Man, is to now try and write the history of Asia, because he feels that there are so many stories there. And India, one part that we haven't even started to open, he said, yes, there's discussion about how Iran and the Central Steppes and all that fed into who we are as a people. But there were other movements happening from East Asia, from China. And so think of us as a river where all these influences were flowing in and flowing out. And his book is a receptacle of all of that. So, ladies and gentlemen,
Give me one sentence.
Yes.
No. You are very generous, but that is not my ultimate ambition in life. I have a much higher ambition in life.
Which is?
Which is to one day sit down and read my book carefully.
Thank you so much.